Hello crafty friends, after many requests, I have created a video series to show you how I create a journal from beginning to end. This is the journal that I'm going to show you how to make. I'm going to be using some digital kits, but you most certainly don't have to use them. You can just use papers that you already have at home. I will show you my process from the very start to the very end. But of course, my way is not the only way to do it. There are many videos on YouTube with different methods of how to create journals. This is just my favorite method and how I create mine. The video series will be in 3 parts. The first one will be how I create the journal, from creating signatures to the cover to inserting and sewing in the signatures. The second video will be how I decorated the cover. And then the third video will be decorating the inside of the journal. At this point in time, you can see the journal is still empty inside. There are no embellishments, no pockets, no tags. I will be adding those in a full-length video showing you all the details and my thought process on how I decorate the pages. I have also created timestamps in the description box below, so if there's only certain parts of the journal making process that you'd like to see, you can just click forward to that timestamp. To start off with, we need to get our papers together for our signatures. This will set the tone and theme for our entire journal. If you're using a digital kit, you will download it once purchased and then you can print it out. I'm lucky enough to have a printer, so I'm going to print mine at home. Once they are printed out, you will see they do have a border around them. This is just the way printing goes. There's nothing wrong with the kit. It cannot print from edge to edge. That's not how printers are made. I have a laser printer. This is how they look. And what I normally do is I print out 2 copies of everything because I like to repeat certain things through my journals. The kits that I'm using here are from NectarsCreations on Etsy. Now, a little secret that you probably don't know is that Nectaria from NectarsCreations is actually my sister. So I'm very privileged to have a sister that designs digital kits for junk journals. And she is offering a really awesome discount in her Etsy shop for all the people that are watching this video. Do check my description box below for the special code to get your discount. To remove the white border, I like to tear it. I just use my ruler to tear this. You could use a cutter if you like a neater edge. I just really love that rough look, and it helps the edges to go darker once you coffee stain. I'm using 2 kits today. The first one is called Vintage Rose Medley, and it's a brand new kit in RIOT Store. It has beautiful roses and a vintage feel with beautiful dusty pink and some gold and a little bit of blue. The next thing I'm going to do is coffee stain my pages. I just use regular instant coffee at home. I put about 4 heaped teaspoons in a cup of water and then add additional cold water to get the intensity I want. This is a little bit of trial and error. After you've done the first or second page, you can see if you need to add more coffee or more water. And then I just dip it in both sides and then place it onto a baking sheet. I'm going to dry mine in the oven on a very low heat because I don't have patience to wait for this to dry overnight and any space to hang it anywhere to dry. I also then just dab the excess coffee with a little rag. This just helps it to dry faster. I'm coffee staining mine because I want the vintage feel. This of course is optional. I'm going to coffee stain the entire kit that I've printed and then also some additional pages, just some plain white papers and some other papers I have from notebooks. Another idea is when you're printing, you can print your kit double-sided so that there's design on both sides of the page. I like to print mine single-sided because I do like the plainer papers that I use then for decorating and adding the pockets, etc. Otherwise, I feel it gets too busy, but you can most certainly print double-sided. My coffee is quite weak, so it gives it a very light coffee stain. And as you can see on the edge of the paper, where I have torn it, it creates a nice darker look. I really love that. So I'm just going to continue now coffee staining the rest of the kit. This is quite a lengthy process and I won't bore you by showing you the entire thing. I will just show you some of it and I will put it on a bit of a fast forward. Once the coffee stained paper is dry, it will buckle. It will not be flat. That's just part of how it works. You can iron it flat afterwards with a very cool iron if you prefer. I'd like to leave it as is because I do like the buckled crinkliness of the vintage paper. Once everything is nice and dry, I'm going to move back to my craft desk, and this is what the kit looks like when it's coffee stained. I'm already loving it. The second kit that I'm using is from the Color Market series that Nectaria has created, and what that is a combination of pages that are a little bit on the plainer side but are of a color theme. For example, this one I'm using is Dusty Rose, and that is just to add as additional filler pages for any kind of journal that has maybe a pink theme. There are other colors available too. Here I've also gathered some other coffee stained papers. These are obviously plainer from notebooks, old books. If it's from a spiral book, where I tear it out, I like to leave that spiral edge. I do like that rough torn edge of the papers. I do like my journals to be a little bit more rustic, not so neat and tidy. It is a personal choice. And then I also have some just plain copy paper, some old book pages, anything that you have that you think would go into your journal. Of course, we're not going to use all of this, but get as much as you can together so you have more choice when you're selecting for your signatures. Once you have all your papers together, we're going to start putting together our signatures. For my journal, I'm going to create 3 signatures. There isn't really a magic number as to how many pages to put in a signature. This is a personal preference depending how chunky or not you want your journal. I usually do between 10 and 14, but for this journal, I've done 16. So that is 16 pages. And what that means is when it's folded in half, that'll be 32 pages. And then each of those is a writing side. So you'll have 64 writing sides per signature. And that will result in a pretty chunky journal, especially once I start decorating. So here I'm folding my kit in half, some with the design facing inwards, some facing outwards. And I'm going to have a combination of the kit paper and the plain paper in between each signature. I also use my bone folder just to make sure that the edge is nice and crisp so it all fits together really well. I'm now going to make my 3 piles for my signature and just start putting the papers down, trying to get an even amount of design and plain in each signature. I'm not really counting what I'm putting down at the moment. I'm just putting down into piles. We will work out the amount at a later stage. And then I also like to find a nice design for the middle of the signature, because when you open that up in the middle, it's a double page that you can see, and I like to have one of the nice design papers in the middle. Especially for the first and third signature. The middle signature I'll probably keep more plain, as I like to do a really huge pocket and have it really filled up with lots of tags in the middle of my journal. More on that in the decorating video. Here I'm just checking that I have an even amount of designed paper in each signature. And now I'm going to start adding my other papers. I do love adding a bit of sheet music. I do have authentic vintage sheet music. This one actually has handwritten notes on, which I really love, so I'm definitely adding that. Now, the sheet music in the middle signature you can see is actually sideways. I personally don't mind if any of the writing from printed text is lying sideways. I know some people don't like that at all and make everything straight. I personally don't mind it, and I do like some things on their side. Again, personal preference. Before I arrange how the papers are going to be in the signature, I'm just going to cut some down to size. I'm using my digital kit as a template for the size. That'll be my largest piece, and then I'm going to trim anything else down to that size or smaller. I will do the same for the other 2 signatures too. And now I'm going to sort them how I want them to be in my signature. So I'm going to alternate between the design paper and some plain paper and make sure that I don't have too many designs at once or too much plain paper at once. I just like it balanced, but you can add these whichever way you like. If you've chosen not to use a digital kit, you're just using plain paper, or this is your first journal and you're only using coffee stain paper or even just plain paper, that is fine too. You can just put the papers all together. You can alternate if you do have some designs. This is really just how you want your journal to look. and I always encourage you to use what you have. This will also work great with just scrapbook paper. Although it's slightly thicker, you'll need less pages for each signature, but it'll most definitely work. If you don't have that either and you only have plain copy paper, you can use plain copy paper, you can stain it, you can use different kinds of botanicals to get different colors. You can experiment and really make it your own. Of course, you can put as many signatures as you like in your journal. You can start off with just one signature if it's your first journal, so it's not too overwhelming. I've chosen 3 because of the size of the spine of the cover that I'm going to use for my journal. And if you are new to the junk journaling world and have not really heard the word signature before, a signature is a collection of papers that are going to be sewn into your journal. So with mine, I have 3 different sets of paper, 3 collections of paper, so I have 3 signatures. I'm always happy to answer any questions about my videos or my process that you see in my videos. I don't always manage to cover everything when I do my voiceover, so please feel free to ask questions in the comments below and I will do my very best to answer them in a timely manner. And remember, no question is ever silly, so always feel confident to ask anything you want. Some creators like to decorate their pages before they assemble the signatures. For me, I like to assemble the entire journal before I decorate because then I find an easier flow of how things are going to work and how they're going to be decorated. I just want to emphasize again, there is no right and wrong way to creating these journals. Everyone creates them in their own way. This is just my way. Try different ways and find the one that best suits your abilities and the way you like to put things together. Here I'm just doing a final count of all my pages in each signature to ensure I have an even amount. And then I'm just finalizing what's going to be in the center fold of each signature. How beautiful does that look? We're now going to create the cover of the journal. I always use cereal boxes for my covers. One of the reasons is because it is free and it is a way to recycle. Another reason is because the way the box is, there is already a built-in spine. I use the short side of the box as the spine of my journal. I'm going to cut down the one side to be able to open this up and then start measuring the cover size. I then cut off the top and the bottom following the fold line of the box. Don't worry if it's not too straight. We are going to use a cutter for this. This is just to get it to a good size to actually fit in my cutter. The first cut I'm going to make is going to be the top of the box, and I'm using the folded side of the box as the straight line of reference. The box is quite thick and I haven't pressed down quite hard enough with my cutter, so I'm just going to do a second run with that. I now need to measure the size of my cover. So I place my signature on top of the cardboard and then I mark a line roughly about a ½ centimeter away from the edge. You can leave more or less space, but I like roughly ½ centimeter of overlap of the cover to my signature. I will then use my cutter to cut on that mark. If you don't have a cutter, that is fine. You can just draw a line with a pencil and a ruler and use the scissors. I'm now going to open the cereal box. I'm going to place the signatures inside, and this will help me measure the width of the journal cover. Remember, don't lay the cereal box flat. You need to have it like a book to be able to measure the width correctly. If you lay it flat, the measurements will be wrong. And then using your pencil again, mark roughly ½ centimeter on the cover away from the signature edge. Make sure the spine of the signature is on the first crease line of the cereal box spine. And then trim this down. I then use my ruler to measure the other side of the cover. I will measure from the spine fold to the edge of the cover and make the same measurement from the other fold to the other edge. And there is your journal cover cut to size. It's already looking like a book. Isn't that exciting? This is optional, but I like to reinforce the spine. So I normally take an extra piece of cardboard from the cereal box and I glue it down in the spine section. This just makes it a little bit more sturdy. I'm using Mod Podge for all the adhesives to do with my cover. That's because it is handy on my desk and I really like working with Mod Podge. You could also use craft glue or even a gel medium. A glue stick might also work, but I'm not sure if that will hold long term. To cover your cover, you can use a multitude of things. You can use fabric, you could use coffee stained paper, pages from the printable you've printed out. I like to use scrapbook paper because I like the thickness. It's slightly thicker than your normal paper and I think it makes good covers. I also have a huge amount of scrapbook paper that I bought on a clearance a few years ago. So I have lots to get through. So I'll pull out the colors that I think would suit my theme and I just go through trying to find one that I think will suit the cover. As you can see, I keep placing my signatures against the papers to see which one is best suited. I will need two 12-inch by 12-inch pieces to cover the entire cover. And to make it easier, I just stick two together using double-sided tape. And now we have a nice big piece to work with. I place my cereal box cardboard over the top and just trim it down slightly smaller so that the edge all the way around is more even, roughly about 5 centimeters. I then pour my Mod Podge onto the design side of the cereal box and I use my paintbrush to cover the entire area with the adhesive. Again, you could use craft glue or gel medium for this part. You could also use double-sided tape, but I would find that a little difficult to get everything flat. I then press everything down really well. I use my bone folder to press out any air bubbles and use my hands to get it as smooth as possible. Turning it over, I'm going to press the edges up to get a good fold line, the top, the bottom, and the sides, and then I'm going to trim the corners. The fold line creates a square, but I'm not cutting exactly on the square. I'm cutting at a bit of an angle. This gives you a good folded corner. For some extra corner reinforcements, I do stick the bits I've just cut off back into the corner. This also helps if you don't get the angles of your corner cutting accurate, which I found in the beginning when I first started making journals. My cutting angles were not great and sometimes the raw cardboard would peep through. If you put your little cornered papers like this, anything that is not covered by the corner will just have the design showing anyway. So it's a good way to hide little oopsies that you might have made. I'm now gluing down each edge and I'm applying glue with a paintbrush over the entire area that the paper is going to cover. Press the edges flat really well and try to get all the air bubbles out. And now we need something for the inside of the cover. For this, I'm going to use scrapbook paper again. I'm keeping it quite plain as I may decide to decorate later. One piece is not enough to fit across from left to right, so I'm going to cut it in half and then I'm going to put another piece down the center. So just cutting this in half and then I'm going to measure from the top to the bottom and then trim that down. I normally leave about 2 to 3 millimeters on the edge. This is a preference. You can leave more or less, or you could make it flush with the edge. I'm going to apply this with the Mod Podge as well, the same way, filling the adhesive all over with a paintbrush, and then once I place it on top, pressing out as many air bubbles as possible using a bone folder and my hand. Then for the centerpiece, I'm going to use a contrasting color. I think this green will work well. I'm just going to measure the piece that I will need. You can make this as wide or as narrow as you want. Now, Mod Podge and craft glue are very wet adhesives, so they do cause things to buckle. So for that reason, what I do when I dry my covers, because the wetness would have gone through the cardboard, I do place it between a heavy book and I dry it overnight to get it as flat as possible. So next day our cover is nice and dry and we're going to bend the book up. Now we're going to do this very, very gently. If you do it all in one go, the paper will rip. So you want to just gently manipulate it and use the bone folder if you need to, just to get the creases in, and just gently massage it until you get everything bent in the right direction. Now it's caused a bit of an air pocket or an air bubble there. That's okay. We're going to put some glue in there with a thin paintbrush and just try and stick that down. Remembering these books are handmade. They don't have to be perfect. There will be a few little bubbles and tears, but I think it all adds to the charm of your journal. I love to add machine stitching to my journals. I know not everyone has a sewing machine, and that is fine. But what I'm going to do is, before I add any of my signatures into my journal, I'm going to add a little bit of stitching because it's easier to do before everything is bound. I've collected a few little items from the kit, some tabs and this flower, and I'm going to stitch that down. I'm just going to add a drop of glue just to keep it in place while I run the stitching. Now I'm going to do stitching from the top all the way to the bottom. I do love the look of stitching and I like all the threads hanging out of my journal, so the more I can have, the better. This is a small tab that's from the kit, so I've cut that out. I'm going to place it on the edge and just stitch that down too. And then I'm also just going to stitch up and down some of the pages just to get the strings in there. I'll add some die cuts or some elements that I feel suit the theme. This part, of course, is optional and if you have a sewing machine. I'm just a little addicted to sewing on paper. A piece of lace for this edge. I think lace is always beautiful with vintage and it does suit this theme quite a bit. You could add lace with double-sided tape or glue if you wanted to add lace and didn't have a sewing machine. Also a piece of fabric that is torn. This is a piece of calico that I have ripped and I'm sewing onto the edge. I love my journals to be quite chunky, so I think adding things like fabric and lace give it that good chunky feel. I already love the way this is looking. I love all the threads that are hanging off and the bits that are spilling off the pages already. This will get a lot more when I decorate. But for now, we need to add these signatures into the cover. First thing is we need to measure where our holes are going to go for the signatures. I'm not usually one for measuring things. I normally like to eyeball. This is one thing that I will take time to measure so that my signatures are all even. Even though I don't suffer from any kind of OCD, I think if holes were not aligned properly and signatures weren't stitched in evenly, I think would do my head in. I created this template, this blue purple thing you see on the left, which is just a cardboard folded in half, where I have measured and made 3 holes, where the holes will be for my signature and in the cover, so everything is spaced evenly. I'm going to be using something called pamphlet stitch, so I need 3 holes for each signature. I leave roughly 2 centimeters from the top and bottom to the first hole, and then the other hole is in the middle. I then use my piercing tool to press through on my markings to create the holes. I'm pressing onto something called the white pages, or you might know it as the yellow pages from the olden days, as my kids call it. I found this a great way to not punch holes into your desk. And then to prepare the first signature, I'm going to make sure that all my center folds are aligned well, and I'm going to clip these with bulldog clips to keep them in place. I'm then going to place this into the middle of my yellow pages again and use my template to punch the holes into the signature. Difficult to see in the video, but there where I'm pressing the piercing tool through is already a hole that was marked, so it is pre-measured. I use an embroidery needle for my stitching that has quite a large eye and is quite a thick needle, and then I use embroidery thread, the type you'd use for tapestries. I find a coordinating color and I cut a piece roughly 40 centimeters long. Now let me show you how to attach your first signature into the cover using something called pamphlet stitch. Always make sure that your signature is facing the right way before you stitch it into your cover. I have sewn it in upside down before. You will start by feeding the needle through the middle hole of the signature. You will then put the needle through the middle hole of the first row of holes. Pull it through, but not all the way. Leave about 5 to 6 centimeters of thread. Now working on the outside, you're going to feed the needle through the top hole in the first row and then also through the same hole of your signature. This can be a bit tricky if your pages aren't aligned, but this comes with practice. We're then going to pull it up and we're going to feed the needle through the bottom hole of the signature and then through the bottom hole of the first row of holes in the cover. The next step is to feed it through the middle hole again, back through to the center of the signature. Remove the needle and then pull both ends really tight. Not too tight that you tear it, but it's got to be quite tight. The way I try to test if it is tight enough, once I've pulled it, I pull the inner threads tight and then I try and snap the threads on the outside. If they make a snapping noise, it's tight enough. If they don't make a snapping noise, pull it slightly tighter. When it is quite tight, tie it into a knot in the middle. Remove the bulldog clips and your first signature is joined to your cover. Repeat the steps for signatures 2 and 3. Feel free to listen to some music at this point or to a podcast if you prefer. I won't be talking through the next steps as they're exactly the same as the previous step. I don't add music to my videos. With the copyright laws, you never know what music you can and can't use. So I will leave it in silence. You can skip forward if you don't want to watch the process again. But if you want to see it again, just to refresh, feel free to do so now. And there you go, your journal has been assembled. How wonderful is that? You've just created a handmade book. I'm going to add some distressed edges on my cover. I'm using my vintage photo oxide ink with my blending sponge, and I'm just going all the way around. And while I was doing that, I decided that I wanted to add some more color onto the spine. So I'm going to add another piece of cardstock. I like to create the contrast. So I just open and lay the book flat. I add my adhesive with a paintbrush and then press the cardstock down. This will need a few hours to dry really well. I hope you enjoyed the first part of the series of creating a junk journal. Please watch out for part 2 and part 3 coming soon. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I really hope you were inspired to create your own journal. Don't forget to check out Nectaria's Etsy store, NectarsCreations. All the links, including the discount code, will be in the description box below. See you again soon. Bye.